I just wanted to mention a few things about the Bearing Foundation. Most of you will know us, but for anyone that doesn't, we're an independent grant-making organisation. Since 2020, our arts theme has been creative engagement opportunities for people with mental health problems. We've given well over 100 grants around that over the last 3 to 4 years, and there's a whole series of publications and events that have accompanied that. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Daniel with one last point, which is a very, very important one, which is to thank Harriet Lowe, who's our communications and research officer, who thought of this event and has also done a very interesting blog about it. I hope you all have a very, very interesting time. Many thanks.
Great, thank you very much, David, and good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to this afternoon's session on arts, creativity and trauma. I'm Daniel Regan and I'll be chairing the event today. I'm a visual artist working in the creative health sector. I'm an arts advisor to the Bearing Foundation, as David mentioned, and I'm the executive director of the Arts and Health Hub, which is an organisation that supports artists exploring health in their practice. So just a few bits of housekeeping before we kick off. The event is being recorded today. If you could also remain on mute as we go through the session and speakers are talking so that we don't have any interruptions. And shortly after 3 o'clock, we will have a portion of time for a Q&A. So please do pop your questions in the chat as we go along, and I will keep an eye on that for when the time comes. You don't need to wait until the Q&A portion if something has come up that you want to ask. And I'm really thrilled to be here this afternoon with such esteemed speakers that bring a wealth of knowledge and perspectives on trauma-informed ways of working with varying audiences and participant groups. So we will hear from 4 different speakers before heading into the Q&A. And firstly, I want to invite Alison O'Connor, who is co-founder of Relive. And Relive is a participatory arts organisation based in Cardiff in Wales, which uses a life story process to enable transformational improvements in people's health and well-being, building compassion, encouraging debate, and reminding us of our shared humanity. And Alison is going to set the scene for us with an introduction into what is known about how the impacts of trauma can affect our brains and our nervous system. And then we'll be joined by Karin, who will talk more specifically about the work that Relive is doing in this field. So I'll hand over to you now, Alison. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be here. Hi, everybody. I'm going to see if I can hide myself so I just don't have that odd experience of talking to myself. Don't know if I can. Okay, so just to say to begin really that in this short time we have to connect and to share a little bit with each other today. To be realistic, I guess that from our experience at Relive, arts and trauma is a rich, fascinating and complex area. So in this short time we have, really all we hope to do is just to be able to share a few insights with you and hopefully begin the process of having a conversation about what this work can do and some things perhaps that we've learned along the way. As Daniel said in his introduction there, Relive's work is about life story arts. So since 2006, Karin and I have been developing our approach, our methodology of life story theatre, which celebrates and creates opportunities for people to reflect on, make sense of their life experiences, and to engage in a relational process of working together with community, with company, and with audiences to share life experiences. So back in 2012, we had the privilege of working with a small group of military veterans and family members who were living with the legacy of conflict in Northern Ireland, in the Falklands, and in the first Gulf War. We are immensely grateful to this group of people who taught us so much about what trauma is, about ways of working safely, ethically, carefully with trauma, and who really opened our eyes to the importance of looking after ourselves as artists, as practitioners doing this work. And this group, Abandoned Brothers was our first project. They began a journey for us, which is ongoing today, which Karin and Graham are going to talk a little bit more about later, which uses the arts to help people who've experienced the trauma of war to process some of their experiences. And we're delighted that we have Graham with us today to share his perspective. And you'll also hear through this presentation the voices of some of our other participants. So we realized back in 2012 that if we wanted to continue this work, we needed to deepen our understanding of trauma. And this was the beginning of a huge, rich learning curve for us, which continues to this day. You know, so Karin and I were reflecting just earlier that in terms of working with trauma and with people impacted by trauma, we believe there's a kind of commitment to lifelong learning, that actually every person, every group, every project teaches us something new. So in terms of what we discovered, you know, we came to appreciate that trauma is a natural human response to overwhelming stress, whether that is from a one-off incident or from an ongoing stress, such as growing up in an unsafe home or being exposed to ongoing stress and trauma through work. And in 1992, Judith Herman wrote a seminal book called Trauma and Recovery. And she connected for the first time the experiences of soldiers on a battlefield to women experiencing domestic abuse or somebody living with childhood sexual abuse. And this was absolutely game-changing for the world of trauma, because this began the process of, which is ongoing today, of widening the lens so that, I guess, laying the foundations in a way for what we now know about adverse childhood experiences and the importance of becoming trauma-informed as a society. So Judith Herman, her model for working with trauma, which has been immensely helpful to us at Relive in terms of structuring, pacing, and developing a project, is a three-stage model. And the first point that she talks about, the essential ingredient is safety. So this is about physical, external safety. So Judith Herman argued that somebody can't begin to recover until the threat has gone away. So if we were designing a project, we would be really transparent with people that they need to be in a place of physical safety in their lives before engaging. But it's also about an inner sense of safety, which we know is something that the arts can help us to tap into and develop. The second stage, Judith Herman described as remembrance and mourning, which is essentially telling the story. So this is the stage where the arts can help people to represent, explore, look at in different ways experiences and events that may have been stuck. Because we know that many people will naturally recover from traumatic experiences. But unfortunately, we also know that some people may be stuck in that frozen place of shutdown or overwhelming emotion, and may need compassionate support and guidance to come through that. And the third stage of Judith's model is reconnection, which we believe is absolutely, and probably most people here have experienced this, what the arts can really offer. Trauma can separate us, keep us cut off. The arts offers a way of reconnecting with other people, but also with parts of ourselves that may have been shut down. So in 2016, I received a Churchill fellowship, which enabled me to go to America to visit lots of inspirational projects where artists were helping people to recover from trauma. And this is where I met Roman, who I'm delighted is going to be sharing his work with you today too. And I witnessed some of his incredible dance work in New York and New Haven. And while I was there in America, I took part in a week-long residency with Bessel van der Kolk, which I'm sure is a name most people are familiar with. He sort of organized a week-long residency where artists and clinicians came together to connect and to look at how their work could complement each other. And at the start of the week, Bessel van der Kolk, whose book The Body Keeps the Score, really cites theatre and the arts as a way forward for trauma work. He asked us as a group, he said, knowing what we know about trauma and how it shuts down the brain, the body, and locks us in, which do we think would be more helpful to somebody recovering from trauma? Would it be 10 weeks of CBT or 10 weeks of tango dancing? The reply was unanimous and kind of set the tone for the week. But I share that because it was incredible to witness. This was one of the most esteemed and renowned psychiatrists alive today, who's trained in the medical model, drugs, diagnosis, really championing the arts and absolutely encouraging the integration of the arts into trauma work. He said that he encourages all of his trainee psychiatrists to join a theatre group so that they can experience the joy and the freedom of improvisation. So trauma separates us. The arts can bring us back together, reconnect us. And just fantastic to see so much amazing practice happening now in the UK and across the world in this field. So I think I'm going to hand to you now, Karin.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you.
Just going to carry this on. So one of the key learning points for us from Abandoned Brothers was that working with people living with complex trauma needs to be long-term work. And we need to be, as a Relive, connected to partner organizations and support services, so we don't feel like we're alone in this work. So Coming Home to the Arts is our ongoing life story arts project for veterans, veteran families and community members. And we have co-created life story theatre performances. We run life story choirs across 3 locations in Wales, and we've recently published a life story comic. So I'd like to share with you now a short film, which is about a life story theatre performance called The Return, y Dychweliad in Welsh. And what you will see is excerpts from the life story theatre performance with veterans, families and community members. And you will also get to hear from some of the company about the impact of the process of co-creating a life story theatre performance. So I will play this now.
The Return y Dychweliad is a site-specific theatre performance that reimagines a World War I victory ball that was held here in this room for returning servicemen and their families after the war. But it also is an immersive theatre production that shares the experiences of contemporary servicemen who return to their communities from conflicts around the world. We've been working creatively with families of ex-servicemen and community members to bridge that gap. And we've been working for the first time with professional actors as well. And then everyone starts to hunker down together, but then I think...
Been in the army and went to Northern Ireland. I come out of the army in 78 and it didn't start affecting me until 2002. And I couldn't rest and settle down, you know, because I was reliving all what I'd been through, 5-month tours, you know. And I went to see the doctor on the Monday morning, the first thing he said to me is, you've got post-traumatic stress disorder.
I got involved with Relive through Dave Price, the Welsh Veterans Partnership. I was kind of lost as a veteran, and Dave said, you should come along. It completely changed my life, to be fair. With Relive, it literally is a way of creating your story, being able to tell your story through different ways, choir and drama. And that's what I'm doing now with drama. Didn't think it'd go this far, though.
When we first started rehearsing this, one of the questions on my mind was, how can I tell people that are doing a show about war when I'm against war as such? And well, I realised it's not about war, it's about how people undergo and overcome challenges. It uses war as a vehicle to tell a really wonderful story.
Most group members have never done a theatre show before, so they are probably wondering what the experience is going to be like, and hopefully as a group of practitioners and a production team we can ensure they have a good experience.
The return to watch is moving, it's compassionate, it's personal, stories from the veterans themselves. And it's a story that needs to be told, because as much as veterans are listened to in clinical sense, it's an everyday issue that families live with. With this, the return, it's bringing that to the forefront in a very loving, understanding way. So I think this is a really good way to bring it into the community.
The people that are here with us as well is fantastic. You know, we get on so well together and that, you know, and we help each other out and when we're going through bad times and good times and that, you know, so it's really nice.
Things like this are extremely important. Just having that hope and having people around you when you're so isolated, just having that community to kind of lean on, just supporting you is massively important.
One thing that I do know, coming together and a communion of people, it's not always good with just medication. It's got to be music and the arts for the soul for me, definitely.
Keep the home fires burning.
You portray the essence of what you've been through and what others have been through. And seeing things happen here really helps open my mind, my heart, because people have gone through the most amazing suffering, and yet they're here acting, singing, supporting each other. So this for me is some sort of magic happening, using just the arts. It's quite amazing.
There's a lot of veterans coming forward now with issues that aren't always being treated, and if they are being treated, they're not being treated in the manner which they believe that is for them. By telling the story that they want, the way they want to, it's also explaining how they want to be viewed and how they need the help.
Doing these shows, I'm glad they've asked me to do them, because, you know, I feel we put across a very good point to people about emotions, families, you know, what they're going through.
We hope audiences get an insight into what it's like for veterans who are returning to their communities, and maybe go back in time and experience what it might have been like to be part of a victory ball 100 years ago.
So this is Coming Home, our first life story comic, co-created with 4 veterans, 3 men and 1 woman, who are interested in exploring their mental health experiences through comics making. And the comic started out as an online life story group during the pandemic, and slowly we built a supportive space for people to begin to process difficult experiences from their service life through the arts. The group shared their love of the comics medium, as well as a need for sharing their experiences to raise awareness of the issues facing ex-servicemen and women who are living with complex trauma in our society. One of the stories is Stretcher Bearer Stan, which is set in Northern Ireland at the Longkesh internment camp, and tells the story of a young army musician's experience trying to process the rights and wrongs of the British military's involvement in Northern Ireland. And as the camp descends into a catastrophic riot, and he's left with a dilemma of whether to medically help his enemies. The story also follows Stan's attempts to process his traumatic experiences in later life and the moral injury that he is left with. And I'm delighted to welcome Stan Graham to talk about the co-creation of this comic and what that was like. So welcome, Graham.
Thank you, Karin.
I was just wondering whether it would be good for our audience just to kind of find out a little bit from you. What was it like to sort of create this comic and to start to share and talk about this traumatic experience that had happened to you? What was that like?
Well, it took nearly, well over 30 years before I really became seriously ill. And I'd been in counselling and been through veterans charities, hospitalisation, but nothing seemed to be shifting. And one day, my long-term counsellor presented me with a piece that Alison had written for a psychology counselling magazine, and it talked about the work of Relive. So I immediately got in touch with Relive, but we couldn't do any theatre because we'd just started the pandemic. So we met for the first few weeks, just as a group, getting to know each other. And then once we built up trust and we found that we were in a safe space, all of us began to open up to each other and telling stories to each other that for some they'd never ever told anyone before. And from that point then, we thought, well, how are we going to present this and who are we going to present it to?
Yeah.
Yes, general audience, but we were really interested in being able to demonstrate through our stories to other veterans, and more importantly, their families, what it's like to go through this. So comic idea came up and we said, yeah, let's give it a try. Animation came up, but that would have been far too expensive. A comic was something affordable. So we got on with the comic and telling our stories as a group, but then we separated into really a one-to-one. I spoke with Karin, And then she brought in Steve, who did all the editing. And it was living 24 hours, hour by hour, or for me, it seemed minute by minute. And Karin was really great at getting at the emotional heart of how I was responding now, but how I may have responded 40 years ago. Then we developed from the script a storyboard, and that was done with the artist, who I never met, but we communicated through our editor, Steve, and it just, when it was printed, it was just, yeah, knockout, fantastic.
Brilliant. Thanks, Graham. I wonder, what was it like? Because for us, that's the first life story comic that we've been involved in. And I wonder, because of this traumatic event that had happened in the riot, what was that like, almost revisiting that panel by panel? Because we were looking at each panel to give as much information to the artist so they could visualize it. I just wonder for you, because one of the things about working, when we are working with people who are living with trauma, is we do not want to re-traumatize anyone. That is not the aim. So what was that like for you, Graham?
Yeah, it could have been that exposure to it in this absolute real detail could have been an issue, but it wasn't. One, because Karin, you held the space really magnificently. You kept coming back and saying, is this okay? You have complete editorial control. So anything that was printed in the comic was purely the storyteller. The storyteller could say, I want this, I don't want that. That gave a sense of safety. I'd been through different forms of trauma therapy where you are exposed, and there was never that same, well, for me, there wasn't that security. And somehow the difference between a clinical approach is there isn't the time. This gave time, minute by minute, to try and work out why I was feeling like this now and why back at that time I was feeling like it. And also reflecting on all those years of guilt and shame and actually hiding from the majority of people that I'd ever been in the military, and certainly never talked about it openly.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. And just to sort of end, I would love to keep talking. I just wonder what has been some of the impact for you from co-creating this comic? Just a few things for our audience, like how has it been on the other side of this comic, the impact?
Well, I've retrieved sort of self-belief in myself that had disappeared, and it's quite amazing to me, but I had a rash on my chest for the best part of 40 years. And for some strange reason, or at least I thought it was strange, the rash disappeared. But actually, there's a lot of work done in Jungian analysis by a dermatologist who cites exactly the same sort of cases. So physically, this rash now for the last, well over 6 months has disappeared. And the other was I suffered really bad tremors. And I can't say they've gone completely, but now the tremors have reduced to a point where, yeah, I'm delighted. So they're two physical aspects.
And just for you, the emotional aspects of knowing your story is out there in the world as a comic, it's in comic shops internationally. How does that feel to have your story out there in the world?
Well, storytelling is all about telling our truths. And I think when you hide or when you don't tell your truth, then that just builds up to the boiling point where, yes, you do fall off the edge.
Thank you, Graham. I'm just going to hand over now, just the last minute or so, to Alison, if that's okay. Thank you, Graham.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Karin. Just to finish, apologies, Daniel, we may have gone slightly over our time. Just to briefly share these are just some thoughts we have about some guiding principles for artists who may be interested in working with trauma. We would encourage arts practitioners to be trauma informed. There's lots of fantastic training available now that you can access. Having a clear structure to a project and a session so people know what to expect, know what's coming. Choice and rolling consent. So continuing to check in with participants that they're making an informed decision about what, when, and how they share. Clear communication, open and transparent. Yeah, just a basic awareness of some techniques or approaches that can help to reduce distress if somebody does tap into difficult feelings, and a quiet space to access. We don't expect artists to be therapists at all. So it's about knowing the remit of our work, but also knowing where to signpost people if they need further support. Co-working where possible. This is deeply skillful work, you know, it takes a long time to develop, and working with somebody you trust is really important. And really, really vital to us is looking after yourself. Working with people who are recovering from trauma is wonderfully rich, rewarding work, and it's tough. So we really encourage you to tap into supervision and really know yourself so that you know what you might be vulnerable to as it comes up. We were going to show you one more video, but we've definitely gone over our time and want to hand back to you, Daniel. So thanks so much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you so much, Karin and Alison and Graham. I think it's really, really powerful and admirable work that you're doing. And I love that you're working across veterans, kind of past and present, as well as professional actors and those in the community. And I really appreciated that sentiment that this is lifelong learning, that each project is an iteration of learning how to be with and support people with complex lived experiences. And those guiding principles at the end were so helpful in thinking about the basics in doing this work, thinking about how we do this work safely for everybody. And thank you so much to Graham for your insights on working on the project too. I was really touched by your comment about retrieving self-belief through this work. So thank you so much to all of you. That brings us on to our next speaker, Baca. Regan is a dancer and choreographer, and he is the founder of Exit 12, a contemporary dance company that creates and performs works exploring the legacy of war and violence. Regan himself was in the US Marines and is here to speak about some of his own experiences and those of working with others through dance. So I'll hand over to you, Regan.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you to the Bearing Foundation for having me today. What I'd like to talk about today is about dancing war stories to heal, educate, and advocate. Many years ago, I was a classical ballet dancer. I trained in classical ballet and had the opportunity during my training to dance some very emotionally charged work and some socially full work. When I became a professional dancer, I was dancing more of the popular ballets that larger ballet companies produced that had a lesser message about social wrongs, social justice, and I felt I needed a change. I also was very sensitive about how people perceived male dancers in society, and I wanted to prove that I could do something very challenging. And so I joined the United States Marine Corps. Our unit was sent to Fallujah, Iraq in 2005 as part of the Iraq War. We did combat patrols throughout Fallujah, looking for insurgents. What we found instead were families and children. And so our unit leadership over time changed our focus and included more humanitarian missions in our day-to-day. But one of the things that remained present was the ever kind of urging to be violent and aggressive, as Marines do, in order to dissuade people from attacking us. I returned from Iraq in 2006, and I decided to turn back to the arts in order to start putting stories of what we had gone through in Fallujah on stage, one, to investigate it further, and two, to present a different side of the war to audiences and people that were used to getting their pictures of the war from popular movies, from the media, or from newscasts. So for about 6 years, we were putting stories of the impact of war through the lens of myself, my experiences, and the experiences of the Marines, and then families around me. After doing that for a while, there were a couple of linchpins that started to fall into place. One was the tragic events of losing one of my Marine brothers to suicide. And since then, we've lost 4 from our unit. The second was knowing that my stories were only one perspective of the conflicts that were going on and how people were experiencing those conflicts. Because of this, we turned to inviting veterans into the studio to do workshops in order to elicit more stories. And that turned into putting them on stage next to us to perform their stories. Currently, I direct Exit 12 Dance Company in New York City, but I also work for Bravo 22 here in the United Kingdom. Now, the path to here came after directing Exit 12 for many years and wanting to delve further into the research of the impact of the arts on veterans. And so I was awarded a Fulbright to come to the United Kingdom and do my Master's of Fine Arts looking at choreography in the military, which I completed in 2019. I decided to stay in the UK and to continue to investigate the similarities and differences of the way that both the US and the UK were using the arts in the military community and amongst the military community. So now I did part of that as working for Soldiers Arts Academy, which is a charitable company within London that both educates and presents opportunities in the arts to veterans. Now I work with Bravo 22, and currently I'm at the Battleback Center, the Royal British Legion's Battleback Center, supporting a theater workshop with 10 members of the military community. Bravo 22 does seasons of arts experiences for the military community. We've done things like songwriting, theater creation, theater production creation, art, painting, poetry, and more. But what I'd like to talk about today is the work that I do with Exit 12 Dance Company, which is paralleled to my work within my PhD that I'm studying for at York St. John University, looking at the performing arts and veterans. So that's where my presentation will focus today. I'm glad Relive talked about, and Alison talked about, trauma being a normal human response to overwhelming stress. One of the things that I've looked at, particularly in my PhD, is that from the US, we're finding that the prevalence of suicide just does not lie within individuals who served within combat. That, at least in the US, there is a higher concentration within the reserve and guard forces. And it's led me to investigate the impact of constant military training on the individual. If you can imagine the constant, and I'll put this in the context of a performing artist, ballet dancers, theater artists spend most of their professional life training, so in rehearsals, in memorizing scripts and memorizing choreography. And then they do all of this in preparation for maybe 3 to 12 to a half an hour on stage, just like the military. For most military members, most of their day-to-day is in training, learning the choreography of war, and practicing that choreography by rehearsing it over and over again in simulated scenarios that are built to make the enemy real for them. In some of the exercises, as you can see here, during our Marine training, there were even simulated explosions, simulated sounds to make the combat zone as real as possible for the member of the military, so that it could both change the individual to someone who is more receptive to the training and to the action, but also so it could work to deaden the normal human response to preserve life and enhance the automatic response of responding to danger in a violent and aggressive way or in a life-taking way. What I'm looking at is using similar techniques to either override that training or to demonstrate an alternative to that training to people who have been through it. And so, like the military, we use choreography, we use imagination, we use creativity, we use vocalization and sound to empower individuals to both understand that there are differences to civilian life than their military life, and two, to remember how to imagine and create again. A lot of this work is based on war stories. And why war stories? With a lot of the participants that we've worked with, and over the years, we've worked with over 900 veterans in a participant and creative way. And we found that no matter what way we work creatively, a war story or multiple war stories will bubble to the top. It is a very powerful experience that our participants have demonstrated that they want to express, that they want to share, and that they want people, at least civilians, to understand at least a fraction of what they went through. Now, the structure within which we do our artistic practice is based on Ricoeur's theory of both narrative identity and gift giving. And we've built this kind of paralleling Ricoeur's theory of how narrative identity works within an individual. And Ricoeur says that there are three kind of kind of waypoints within the building of narrative identity. There's self-affirmation, which is a person understanding who they are. There's self-identification, which is once I understand who I am, I want to communicate that to people and I want to put it out into the world so others will understand me. And then there's mutual recognition, which is once I put who I am out into the world, then the world or other people can come back at me and we can have a discussion on how we find how we both work in the world. The way we do that is by modeling our structure after these signposts. Our workshops with veterans are focused on that self-affirmation, that self-identification. Our performances, when we empower veterans to get on stage and to perform the things that they've created in our workshops, that is our mode of the veteran telling who they are to the world, expressing who they are, and then mutual recognition. Every performance, post-performance, we have a moderator who engages in a discussion with the audience and the veteran. And it's more than just a post-performance Q&A. It is a discussion about the themes that were brought up in the performance that the moderator is prepared to take the audience on a journey through and to engage in discussions about these important topics. And I'd like to give you an example of a project that we just created that can give you a better picture of how this works. In April and May, we brought 14 military connected individuals and two refugees from the war in Ukraine onto the Intrepid, which is an aircraft carrier in New York Harbor. And over 8 weeks, we ran workshops with them, aimed at a performance on what is the United States Memorial Day weekend for an invited audience. And then we had a moderator who led the audience and the performers through a discussion post-performance. Every Monday, the participants would join us on the Intrepid in a room at the aft of the ship, where we started with a physical warm-up. It was usually during sunset. Like Relive shared, we designated a safe space where the participants could retreat to if they felt they needed to. We also had a dance movement therapist from the National Intrepid Center of Excellence at Walter Reed Military Medical Center in Washington, outside of Washington, DC, on hand if there was a higher therapeutic need that was prevalent in the room. As we went on, we used different workshop techniques that we've developed over the years to elicit stories that could elicit movement that we could build into a show. We also paired that with creative writing. So this kind of marrying of creative writing and movement and theater was prevalent throughout all of the workshops. One of the workshop modules that we went through was what we call a name phrase, where participants are given the instruction to create movement based on their name. It's scaffolded using just a gesture based on their name so that we can learn everybody's name. And then they're given an instruction to create a name phrase. And this individual, one of our participants, as we were giving this introduction, just stood there while everyone else is working with his hands folded in, near his mouth. And I walked up to him and I said, "Can I help you? Are you having a difficult time? How can we move through this?" And he looked at me and he said, "You know, Ramon, I only know how to move like the military taught me. I don't know how to do what you're asking me to do." And I said, "Let's start there. Everyone who's in the military knows how to learn choreographed movement, knows how to rehearse choreographed movement. So let's use some of that movement." And you can see some of that movement here on the deck of the Intrepid, where we are, he decided to use close quarter combat rifle techniques, and then switched over to a pistol and kind of inputted that into his name phrase. We paired him with an older veteran who did something similar a couple of years ago. And together they started with a very harsh military style movement and then moved to the older gentleman's movement of release and forgiveness that he had built over years and years and years of working with us.
Ramon, sorry to interrupt. We only have
yeah.
a few minutes left, just giving you a time.
I will move on to the results.
Thank you so much.
We performed this on the Intrepid, and one of the amazing things was the impact on the individuals. The audience reported that it was a beautiful and touching experience and that the emotional impact was great, but the impact on the individuals was greater. One of the individuals said that it gave them an opportunity to live a life they were excited about. Another individual said that they were profound and extremely meaningful But here's the one that I want to focus in on as I end. This is the older gentleman that I talked about. And he said that during one of the exercises we gave him, he recreated physically one of the worst moments of his life. And he was shocked at how much he felt and remembered in his body and muscle and bones. But with everyone around him and everyone being so supportive, he was able to continue that movement until his heart was still. And after this, his vet counselor reduced his status from high suicide risk to low. That's the work that we do, and an example of the work that we do in the impact. Thank you so much for the time, and sorry for going over.
No problem at all. Thank you so much, Roman. It's so powerful to see how you've gone from your sort of your own initial experiences to then growing to be more encompassing of other people's experiences and working with others. And I found it really fascinating that you drew those parallels between rehearsing for performance and war. And I think that expression, the choreography of war is incredibly powerful and will stay with me. So thank you. Our final speaker for this afternoon is Kevin Turner, and Kevin is the co-founder and co-artistic director of company Chameleon, a dance theatre organisation based in Manchester. Kevin has a wonderfully varied background, having created and performed pieces alongside delivering participatory projects. And Kevin is going to be speaking about working with adults and young people within secure settings. So I'll hand over to you, Kevin. Great to have you here.
Great to be here, Daniel. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. So yeah, my name is Kevin Edward Turner. My pronouns are he, him. I am a middle-aged, mixed-raced Mancunian with short hair, short curly hair, and I'm wearing a black t-shirt. So yeah, I think it's important for me to disclose that I am an artist. I'm not a mental health specialist, but I do have lived experience of trauma and do have a serious mental health condition. And I've worked with those who have had trauma or created trauma or both. When experienced trauma in my childhood and youth, I recognize how vital and important the creative and artistic experience is to working through trauma and providing an outlet for expressing one's inner world. As we know, finding ways to express your thoughts and feelings is the first step in better understanding yourself, your needs, and promoting mental health and well-being. As a young person, I saw how dancing, moving, creating, collaborating, and seeing my ideas valued, my thoughts heard had a huge benefit to my overall health and well-being, but massively to my mental health. The art allowed me as a young person to take my traumatic life experiences and turn it into something constructive and positive, not unhealthy and destructive. And I have the privilege to see this transformation in my work all the time. I respond to trauma in my creative work in a careful and considerate way. It can be very triggering and upsetting for participants to talk about and engage with their trauma. The best work comes from when they do engage safely with their traumatic experiences. But to do this, it's important to understand that a process needs to happen, and a variety of guided conversations and exercises are needed to build trust and safety in the space and with each other in order for that important work to take place. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a project I co-developed with a theatre organisation called Broad. And I think this will be the best way for me to explore this area of discussion. Broad is a dance forum theatre programme called so, Building Resilience and Overcoming Adversity Through Dance and Drama. Broad was designed for vulnerable groups in prisons, secure children's centres, and secure hospitals. The programme combines forum theatre and dance with violent, non-violent communication and strength-based and trauma-informed approaches with a restorative practice framework. The programme aims to improve communication and self-esteem, thus reducing the risk of violence and harmful behaviours, improve mental health and overcome the barriers caused by adversity and trauma, and increase resilience and well-being. I thought I would give a brief breakdown of the three main approaches to the project before talking about the project more in depth, as the approaches really frame the facilitation of the project. So non-violent communication, what is it? It's an important technique which essentially requires facilitators to be non-judgmental in their responses and to lead by example in communicating sincere thoughts and feelings. It encourages people to talk about how they feel, recognizing there are needs and values influencing the expression of anger and other emotions which may lead to violence. The strength-based approach involves focusing on people's abilities or competencies rather than their problems or failings. In the choices of exercises and in communication, it's a can-do positive approach to participants' abilities and potential, which addresses lack of confidence and the likelihood individuals are more capable than they often realize. It requires the exercising of interpersonal sensitivity and support, and involves encouragement, care, and adaptation to the abilities of the participants. This builds confidence and competence to address new and more challenging tasks. Arguments or refusals to participate are viewed as learning opportunities rather than situations to be provided. And then, most relevant to the conversation we're having today, trauma-informed practice. This closely resembles long-standing principles in person-centered care, which involve careful listening, positive regard, attunement to the needs and capacities of individuals, and awareness of the potential of triggering emotions connected to past traumatic events. It acknowledges that behavior that appears dysfunctional may reflect adaptive capacities developed in the response to adverse childhood experiences. It aims to repair harm through revealing tension and increasing a sense of agency in body and mind. If trauma is held within the body, dance is a particularly useful tool for trauma-informed practice because it enables participants to focus on physical and emotional states, working through expressive and aesthetic movement and responding to the movement of others. The trauma-informed approach also involves reflective listening and affirmation, and so complements the strength-based and non-violent communication approaches in these respects. In sum, these informed approaches to improving communication and increasing responsible agency complement each other and are very helpful for the participants in this program, and are great for supporting a wider aim of reducing violence in controlled settings. So I just really wanted to just focus on those three approaches because that's what was the real framework of the project and how we approached the participants. So what is Broad? Broad was a 5-day workshop program, which each day being a standalone workshop. We wanted the flexibility so that those who came in and out of the program would still be part of a process for that day that they attended. At the end of the 5-day program, we had a performance that we did in front of the staff. So this was all in secure units. This was in secure units for children, prisons, secure mental health units, both for youth and both for adults. So what did we actually do? So we engaged in creative and physical tasks in groups which facilitate self and group reflection on violence and self-harm related experiences, with participants voluntarily sharing in workshop discussions. The workshops involved a series of movement and drama-based exercises punctuated by discussions about relationships, feelings, and emotional self-management in challenging situations. The exercise and discussions encourage teamwork, self and group awareness, and communication, and are adapted to the abilities of the group. After warm-up exercises, which heightened attentiveness, reaction times, and teamwork, the participants are introduced to some basic dance moves and invited to express different emotions through them. One example, one group performed frustration at not being listened to, which then turned into a short piece of choreography depicting how different negative outcomes can affect those feelings of not being heard. Another group individually depicted the different negative outcomes of excessive alcohol and drug use, drug withdrawal, being penniless, drunkenness, and aggression. After displaying these using only their bodies, they then changed to different poses and positions depicting different hobbies as alternative ways to spend their money and time happily. At all times, me and my facilitating team gave positive encouragement and made suggestions about how to improve their dance moves and acting. The program progressively increased participants' confidence, self-esteem, and communication skills. In doing so, it directly addressed individual and group modes of thinking and feelings which influence self-harm and violence. The program is a creative activity which promotes learning, well-being, supports rehabilitation, and improves physical health. It involves participants reflecting upon their lives and social responsibilities. As an artistic and cultural experience, the program could enhance the secure environment, making it more conducive to rehabilitation because it creates a safe environment where personal change can occur. The program content and process involves participants in exploring personal, social, and ethical issues in a containing and supportive group of experienced facilitators. This promotes positive personal development and behavior. Participants took pride in the challenge of the work of the program, becoming more self-confident. Participants' success in completing the workshop demonstrates to them that they can be successful learners on their future courses. The program provides an accessible entry point to creative-based activity with an adjustable level of challenge to produce a sense of achievement. And at the end of it, they got a really cool expressive art certificate, which they absolutely loved. I think that movement has the unique ability to tap into and express deep, visceral feelings and emotions, phenomena that are so layered and multidimensional that sometimes words do not suffice. As we all move, movement is universal. We all can use our bodies to express our feelings and our experiences of trauma. And by doing so, and working through and processing that trauma in an embodied, creative, constructive, and healthy way. We were really, really fortunate to do this broad program in a variety of different contexts. And I have to say that it was successful. There was a lot of kind of challenges sometimes, but we always managed to find a way to talk about it and bring that into the creative process. That's the end of my presentation. I hope I didn't speak too quickly. There you go.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Karin. Yeah, there's so much in there in terms of what everybody has said. So I've had some questions sent to me, so it'd be great to bring us together as a panel, and I can kind of kick off. So there was a really practical question about trauma-informed training. And I was, I guess, thinking about, what were your journeys as kind of organizations and individuals in terms of accessing training? Where did you go and where could you signpost other people that are on the Zoom that are curious about starting this kind of work? Could I come to Alison and Karin first? Oh, Alison, you're just on mute.
Hi there. So wonderful to hear Roman and Kevin's work there. Just fantastic. Yeah, I think, Karin, I don't know, where would you say we started in terms of training with becoming trauma-informed?
Well, our first partnership was with Veterans NHS Wales. So we knew that if we were to invite veterans and family members who are living with complex trauma, we did need a real insight and understanding. And for us, Veterans NHS Wales was sort of a key organisation for talking about their experiences of working alongside veterans and families. Some of the work, the practice, which is a clinical therapeutic practice, but it did allow us to sort of open a door to different experiences, different approaches, and what to expect in a way. I don't know if there's anything to add there, Alison.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was really lucky with my travel fellowship to attend some work with Bessel van der Kolk. Someone's just put in the chat Kazoom Arts, and yeah, absolutely. I've read and heard great things about their training, so great for people to tap into that.
And a lot of reading lots of books on not just clinical books, but people's kind of creative explorations of
Yeah.
working alongside people. I think that hearing from arts practitioners and hearing the voices of people who are experiencing the creative work is as informative as anything else.
Mm.
Yeah.
Could I just add to that what Karin said about reading? There's a fantastic book called Trauma Stewardship. I've forgotten the name of the author now, but I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat. I think personally it is the best thing I've read about how to look after ourselves when we're working with people impacted by trauma. It's brilliant. I'll put that in the chat.
Great, thank you so much, Alison and Karin.
Can I just
Yeah, I was
jump
going to
on
say,
something
Kevin.
that Alison's just said then, actually, just the last point, I just thought it was absolutely brilliant, like actually supervision and taking care of yourself is, I think that's a really important point to talk
Sorry,
about.
I can't hear what anyone is saying. Everyone's unmuted. I can't hear what anyone's saying.
So I think we just need to speak a bit slower and clearer. There was a bit there where we were just speaking over each other, and I think it's difficult with the captions. But yes, Kevin, like access to supervision and making sure that as a workforce that we're also taking care of ourselves. There's obviously the safeguarding of participants, but actually it's the safeguarding of everybody that works on these projects, a kind of ecosystem of care there. Roman, did you have anything that you wanted to add in terms of your sort of coming to a sort of trauma-informed practice, any learnings?
I think Alison, Karin spoke very well about research, as well as training programs that can be utilized to help bolster a trauma-informed practice. In the US, there are several organizations that not only do trauma-informed practice trainings, but also military competency training of working with the military, which we have done. And we also have gleaned from collaborators that have worked with us from the Veterans Administration in the US and other organizations that work with people impacted by trauma, as well as other creatives. So there's quite a robust kind of concentration of learnings that we've utilized.
Great, thanks, Roman. There was a question that came in that I'll read it out for you. It says, do the panel think that the remembrance and mourning / telling your story stage is essential for recovery? What do they think of arts activity or arts organizations that provide the first and third stages, i.e. safety and reconnection, but don't include the remembering stage due to the absence of expertise to manage that particular stage? Are they still effective? Any thoughts?
Maybe I'll just kick us off. I would say yes, absolutely. I think the thinking around recovery from trauma used to be that someone has to actually verbalize and tell and piece together their whole story to be able to recover. And I think the more we learn and understand, the more we're moving away from that. And actually, as I think, Kevin, you mentioned about the expression of feeling that the arts can offer. I think that can do the work of the remembrance and mourning stage without anybody ever having have to tell the story. I don't know what anyone else would say about that.
I'd have to say I agree. I think, I said it in my speech before, sometimes, I'm not a wordsmith, and I'm in my body, I'm a dancer choreographer, the rest of it. But, some things are really multi-layered and multi-dimensional. And I feel like having an opportunity to express that physically, that definitely creates that space, because you're not verbalizing it, you're not having to choose the word, because maybe there isn't a word, maybe there's just a feeling and an emotion that's been so internalized and so pushed down for so long. It needs to find a way to be expressed.
I think everybody comes to these arts experiences with their own aims and their own availability. And for our last project, we leaned into the creative aspect and decided to utilize our professional artists as a vessel for the more difficult things to talk about. So they had a responsibility, they were carrying a responsibility. So this project in particular was very beautiful because the 14 participants played with joy and love and connection. And there was a little bit of, trauma and impact sprinkled in there, but that's where they sat and that's where they created, and it was beautiful. And then we kind of bookended that performance with other pieces that showed the more traumatic, the very important things that needed to be discussed, and it landed very, very well.
There's also safe ways to explore those traumatic experiences as well. You can set up like structures, or so one exercise I do often is, this particularly works well with young people, but can work with anyone. Just draw a big piece of paper, draw a head on it, and say, okay, let's make a character up. Let's talk about a character who may be in a similar situation to us right now. And it's such a simple exercise that allows people to project onto a character. So they're not necessarily talking, well, they are talking about themselves, but they're not. They're talking about this character that they've just created. And, I think simple exercises like that can just give a little bit of distance to what it is that we're exploring and create a little bit of a safety net.
Thank you so much. There was a question about evaluation, and whilst I am loath to talk about evaluation in any kind of detail, I guess I want to put a bit of a spin on it in terms of kind of ethical evaluation when working with people in a way that questions are not too intrusive or feel like they're too sort of medicalized in terms of scales that are used. So I'm curious about what kind of frameworks you might be using sensitively around evaluating and looking at impacts and learnings. Could I go with Roman first? Yeah.
I figured we could mix it up a bit. We did this last project in a kind of 3-tiered approach. So there was not only collecting qualitative data for my PhD research, so video, audio, written feedback from the participants and written contributions from the from the participants as well, that could be analyzed at a later date. We also used the work scale, the Edinburgh work scale, to see the changes in well-being. And then our granting organization, which was the National Endowment for the Arts in the US, also sent out a participant survey. What we focused on and what we underlined as important was trying not to utilize a feedback mechanism that clouded the creative process. A lot of feedback mechanisms will come in and they'll ask really intrusive and very mentally and trauma-focused questions that explicitly talk about suicide, that explicitly talk about other things. And we very specifically did not choose those mechanisms because we wanted to focus on the creative. And what we found was not only was the creative enhanced by that, but our participants gave just incredible feedback.
It's like having a trauma-informed approach to evaluation that is also ethical and non-intrusive and also not re-traumatizing. Alison, Karin, did you want to respond?
Yeah, there's, I don't know if anyone's heard of the most significant change theory, which is an interesting way of kind of exploring people's experiences of a project through stories. And through a sort of a shared conversations, you're looking at sort of what are some of the changes that are happening and why they're happening. And that for some people can be a gentle way without traumatizing anyone of looking at individual people's experiences of a collective project. So that could be interesting for some people. I can put something in the chat about that, if that helps, like a link.
Yeah, I've just popped one in quickly because I've used that a few times, and what I found really helpful about that sort of framework is also that it's not just about asking participants about the impact of this project, but it can be a sort of 360 approach. So it's everybody that has worked on this project. You know, what has been the biggest change for the organisation in terms of maybe changes to ways of working or changes to evaluation and questions that you ask. Kevin, did you have a response?
So, you know, well, sometimes we take the radical approach of asking the participants to develop the evaluation model, to be honest with you, you know, and asking them what was valuable to them, what was their most interesting experience or engaging experience, and even down, sometimes we allow them to come up with, to phrase the actual questions themselves, because I just think sometimes, you know, obviously, well, being an AD of an NPO, I recognize all the different metrics that you need to get to funding bodies and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I use the usual techniques that Roman was talking about before in terms of like video, and I'm just making sure that video and written, and just having lots of different mediums in which people can evaluate. Because also as well, that particular project I was just talking about, broad, and elements of that was in, it was all in different secure settings, from medical to justice, you know, and some of the people don't read or write. So there needs to be ways in which they can be included in the evaluation as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important point around access. You know, there's no point designing an evaluation framework if it's not accessible to some people. You're not going to be able to get that information from people. There was a question or sort of a comment around today. We've obviously had lots of sort of body-based sort of interventions, and somebody asked, you know, in your sort of in your thoughts, I'm guessing I know the answer, but do you think that body-based interventions are the best type of way of engaging with people that have experienced trauma, and why body-based methods over other methods? Alison, can I come to you?
I was thinking about one of the things that Bessel van der Kolk talks about is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. He cites that as a moment where he was there witnessing some of it, where he went, oh, I get it. I see what moving can do, because he said that people were spontaneously at the end of each day, after sharing their testimony of the violence and the oppression they'd experienced, they would dance, sway, drum, sing together, and like a kind of instinctive way of actually releasing that, you know, tension and stress from telling their trauma story. So I think it is something innate in us as humans to move, to shake off what we're holding and carrying. But I also think Graham and Karin's conversation earlier is an example of, I guess, a maybe less body-based way of working, which fantastically had a real healing response on Graham's body, from, you know, what he talked about the rash healing. And Graham, I'm hoping you're still with us here, and I hope you don't mind me referring to that. Yeah, so they were my thoughts there, Daniel.
Great, thanks, Alison. And Kevin, I saw you reach your hand forward, so I'll come to you, and then to you, Karin, and then Roman as well.
I kind of a bit biased being a dance artist, so you know, absolutely. But then just to be completely contradict myself, recently I've been working on a project with a lot of different people who experienced trauma and got quite complicated pasts, and a variety of different kind of backgrounds and stuff. And you know, we've been doing some movement stuff together as well, but we've also been doing a lot of writing and a lot of visual art as well. And I think it was the first time I was in this project, so I was like, when I've met people who were like, you know what, this actually is the same feeling they get from drawing or writing a poem as I do from moving. So I think it's about, I think different people have different mechanisms and can use different mechanisms, but I think it's about the place you go to and what it is that you're, and the creative process that you're in. I think that's what's vital. And I think Yeah. So, yeah.
I fully expected that you would be slightly biased. Karin.
I was wondering if we could bring Graham in here, if it's okay. I know he is with us. I just wondered whether you could just share, Graham, a little bit about our life story group and how we used to begin and end sessions. Just thought might be.
Yeah, certainly, Karen. Yeah, at the start and at the end of all our group sessions, we did music. There was, oh gosh, I forgot his name now, from the Regan team.
Oh, Neil.
Neil was there, and another of the participants would play music, and we would sing along with them. So at the beginning, it kind of just broke the ice, and at the end, it was something where we could just relax into that and finish the online sessions, and yeah, have that lovely emotional get together after all we'd experienced. So brilliant. Yeah.
Thanks,
Graham. Thank you so much, Graham. Thank you. And Raman, did you have some thoughts?
I think Kevin keyed in on it so brilliantly in that different people need different things. I've worked with a range of veteran organizations that have tried to heal veterans using different modalities, whether it's extreme sport or art or theater. And I think what's important is that you find something that the individual is passionate about and that they'll continue to do, that it's done with other people, and that they're given the ability to tell stories. And what is incredible about that is kind of that thing that I was talking about of sharing oneself with another. And when people are able to do that, it is cathartic. And people are able to show other people how they experience the world, whether it's, through sport, through physicality, through art, through dance, through theater. We have the gift of being able to just partake in somebody else's view for just a minute. And it's such a beautiful thing.
I think that's a beautiful point to end on. I know that Alison, you wanted to share a short film, which we're going to close with. But just want to say a huge thank you to Alison, to Karin, to Kevin, to Raman, to Graham. It's been such an insightful session. Perhaps David could commission us to have a full day of discussing this, because I think there's so much learning in there. But I'll hand over to you, Alison, to play your film, and that will be our sort of finishing for the session. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your contributions in the chat.
I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real.
When a guy that's been blown up in Afghanistan that won't raise his eyes from the floor will suddenly stand up, sing, it's just magical.
It just feels so at home and a really good space to come, and it just really enriches my life where I've had an empty hole before.
What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the end.
Even people who don't think they can sing actually can. I'm sure we've all sung at the rugby matches or even in the shower. It will change you, and it's just a fantastic opportunity.
If you feel alone, I think this is the place that releases that. It is a genuine family.
If I could start again.